I'm Aubrey Cole, 28 years old, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I should be floating on air, clutching my bouquet, ready to walk toward the man I love and start our future together. Instead, I stood frozen at the end of a long, flower-lined aisle, my heart pounding so violently I could hear it over the wedding music. Everyone was smiling. My bridesmaids, the guests, even my father, Richard, who looked so proud sitting in the front row. To anyone watching, it must have seemed like a perfect scene from a fairy tale wedding. But inside, I felt like the walls were closing in. I always thought my father would be the one to protect me. But on my wedding day, I realized he'd been protecting his control, not me. As the music swelled and the officiant motioned for me to step forward, I caught a flash of movement near the back of the hall. Daniel, my fiancé's best man and lifelong friend, was pushing through the crowd, his face pale, his tie askew. He looked terrified, like someone running to stop a train wreck. In his hand, he clutched a folded document, shaking as he waved it toward me. The moment our eyes met, my stomach dropped. I didn't know what the paper was, but I knew with absolute certainty that whatever it contained was about to change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, and why my wedding ended in total chaos, let me know in the comments if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted. And don't forget to like and subscribe so I can share more of my true stories. I'd spent months imagining what this day would look like. The venue was everything I dreamed of. A rustic yet elegant winery tucked into rolling hills, with string lights draped over the wooden beams and the scent of white roses and lavender filling the air. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, casting a golden glow over rows of ivory chairs. My dress was exactly what I'd pictured as a little girl. Soft, flowing silk with delicate lace sleeves and a train that shimmered when I moved. My bridesmaids bustled around me in blush pink gowns, fussing over my veil and lipstick, while my maid of honor, my cousin Lila, tried to keep everyone calm. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale, the kind of wedding people post about online with captions like, "Blessed and dream come true." But deep inside, I felt unsettled. The morning had started with little things that seemed off. My father, Richard, had been unusually attentive, hovering in the bridal suite, asking about seating charts and making sure the important investors were front and center. He'd always been controlling, but today his presence felt suffocating, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Ethan, my fiancé, was even stranger. Normally calm and reassuring, he seemed nervous. More than just pre-wedding jitters. Every time our eyes met, he gave me a strained smile before quickly looking away. I told myself he was just overwhelmed, but a small, nagging voice inside whispered that it was something more. As I adjusted my veil, Richard appeared in the doorway. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his salt and pepper hair immaculately styled, his smile too sharp. "Everything will be perfect, sweetheart," he said smoothly, stepping closer to brush an imaginary speck of dust off my shoulder. Then, with a tone that made my skin prickle, he added, "Just like I planned." For a split second, my breath caught. Like he planned? I forced a laugh, brushing off the unease twisting in my gut. "Thanks, Dad, I'm just nervous, I guess." His smile didn't waver. "No need to be nervous. I've made sure today will go exactly as it should." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something about his words felt less like comfort and more like a warning. While the bridesmaids adjusted my dress, I found myself drifting back into memories, the kind you try to push away but that bubble up at the worst times. My father had always been the center of my world growing up. He was strict, impossibly so. I had curfews no one else had. Friends he didn't approve of were forbidden. Even my wardrobe was monitored. At 15, I'd convinced myself that his rules were just because he cared, until the night everything changed. That night, I'd been in my room when I heard my parents shouting downstairs. My mother's voice was desperate, trembling. My father's was sharp and cutting, full of anger. I remember covering my ears, trying not to listen, until a loud slam made my heart race. Then silence. The next morning, my mother was gone. A car accident, they said. The roads had been icy. She must have lost control. That's what everyone believed. That's what I tried to believe. But deep down, there were things that didn't add up. Her packed suitcase found later in the closet. The way my father refused to talk about that night. The hollow look in his eyes at the funeral. He became even more controlling after that, smothering me with what he called protection. For years, I longed for freedom. And then I met Ethan. It was at a food festival downtown. He was running a booth for his small catering business, and I was sampling pastries with Lila. When he handed me a slice of lemon cake, our eyes met, and something clicked. Ethan was different. Warm, genuine, and passionate about his dreams. We talked for hours about opening a bakery together, laughing like we'd known each other forever. With him, I felt seen, safe, loved. He wasn't just my fiancé, he was my chance to finally build a life on my own terms. Aubrey, Lila's voice pulled me back to the present. She knelt beside me, adjusting the hem of my dress with an intensity that didn't match the simple task. "You okay?" I asked, noticing the tension in her jaw. Her eyes flicked toward the door, where my father had just left. She hesitated, biting her lip. "Be careful, Aubrey. Your dad has a way of making people think they owe him everything. Just don't let him make you feel trapped." I frowned. "Lila, it's my wedding day. Can we not? I'm serious." Her voice was low, urgent. "He's complicated. Just promise me you'll stay true to yourself." Before I could respond, the coordinator burst in, announcing it was almost time. Lila forced a smile and stood, but her warning lingered like a storm cloud. The rehearsal dinner the night before replayed in my mind as I waited in the bridal suite. It should have been fun and lighthearted, a celebration with family and friends. Instead, it had been a battlefield disguised as a dinner party. Richard gave a toast that started out charming but quickly turned sharp. "Ethan," he'd said, raising his glass. "Welcome to the family. I admire your ambition. It takes courage to aim so high when you come from humble beginnings." The room had chuckled politely, but I'd seen Ethan's jaw tighten. Richard wasn't congratulating him. He was belittling him in front of everyone. Ethan responded graciously, but I could tell he was hurt. Later, when we were alone on the terrace, he'd taken my hands, his expression tense. "Aubrey, there's something I need to tell you before tomorrow," he began. But before he could continue, Richard appeared like a shadow, interrupting with a laugh and a pat on Ethan's shoulder. "There you two are! Come back inside, everyone's asking for the happy couple." Ethan froze, his words dying on his lips. He gave me a quick, strained smile and followed my father back in, leaving me confused and uneasy. At the time, I told myself it was just pre-wedding nerves. Now, standing here in my bridal suite, I wasn't so sure. As the ceremony music began to play, I glanced at Ethan waiting at the altar. His face was pale, his shoulders stiff. Then, just for a second, I saw it, a flicker of something raw and fearful in his eyes, before he forced another smile. My stomach knotted. What is he hiding from me? As I took my first step toward the aisle, Daniel burst through the doors, wild-eyed and clutching that folded document, and in that instant, I knew my wedding was about to unravel. The morning of my wedding was a whirlwind. My bridesmaids flitted around the bridal suite like honeybees, chattering and laughing nervously. Someone had misplaced a hairpin. Someone else had spilled champagne on her dress. Lila was furiously trying to fix a last-minute tear in the lace hem of my gown with a tiny emergency sewing kit. On the surface, it felt like normal wedding day chaos, but underneath, something wasn't right. Richard, my father, was too cheerful. He moved through the room like a politician at a campaign rally, kissing cheeks, offering compliments, and issuing sharp instructions when he thought no one was listening. "Switch the seating cards. Senator Halverson must be at table 3, not table 5. Make sure the photographer gets plenty of shots of Aubrey and me together. Front page material. No champagne for Ethan yet. He needs to be sharp." It wasn't unusual for him to be controlling, but today, he wasn't just involved. He was orchestrating everything, like a puppeteer pulling strings. Meanwhile, Daniel, Ethan's best man, lingered awkwardly near the door, his phone in his hand, clearly uncomfortable with the level of tension in the room. Daniel wasn't one for drama. He'd always been easygoing and loyal, the kind of guy who could keep Ethan grounded. But today, he looked agitated. I didn't know at the time what he'd just overheard. While I was distracted by the final touches on my veil, Richard had stepped into the adjoining office to make a call. He shut the door but didn't realize Daniel was nearby. Daniel would later tell me the conversation was brief but chilling. Once they're married, Richard's voice carried through the slightly cracked door. "The business and house are secured under my name. She'll never leave me. Not like her mother tried to." A pause. The low murmur of a lawyer's voice on the other end. Yes, the papers are ready. As soon as Ethan signs during the license filing, it's legally binding." Richard's tone sharpened. "This is for her own good. I refuse to let anyone take her or my investments away." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't supposed to hear this. Instinct told him to get proof, so he slipped into the office once Richard left. Inside, tucked under a stack of wedding invoices and vendor receipts, he found a neatly folded document with legal stamps. The title in bold letters sent a shiver down his spine. Prenuptial Agreement. Aubrey Cole and Ethan Keller. His stomach dropped as he scanned the contents, his hands trembling. When he finished, his face was pale. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the bridal suite, clutching the document like a live grenade. I was sitting in front of the mirror, trying to slow my racing heart, when the door burst open. Daniel stumbled in, breathless, eyes wide with panic. "Aubrey," he gasped, holding out the folded paper. "You need to see this. Now." The room went silent. My bridesmaids froze mid-giggle, sensing something terrible was about to happen. "What is this?" I asked, my voice unsteady as I took the paper from him. "Just read it," Daniel urged, his face etched with urgency. I unfolded the document and my eyes darted over the legal jargon. The words swam at first, incomprehensible, until they didn't. Clause after clause carved up my future like a pie to be divided between strangers. Richard would own 50% of the bakery Ethan and I had dreamed of building together. He had first refusal rights on any home Ethan and I purchased. No major financial decision, from loans to investments, could be made without his signature. My breath caught in my throat. This can't be real. It has to be a mistake. Daniel's expression softened, but his eyes were full of pity. "Aubrey, it's real. Ethan signed it. 2 weeks ago, I felt like the ground was tilting beneath me." "No," I whispered, shaking my head violently. "Ethan would never—" "He didn't want to," Daniel said quickly. "I think he felt pressured, but he signed." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Pressured? By who? I didn't need to ask. There was only one person capable of this level of manipulation. My father. But Ethan, he should have told me. My fingers tightened around the paper, crumpling it slightly. A sharp ache bloomed in my chest, part rage, part heartbreak. "Ethan," I breathed, barely more than a whisper. "How could you?" The door creaked open behind me, and a familiar voice, warm, trembling, said, "Aubrey?" I turned slowly, my throat thick with emotion. And there he was. Ethan. His face was pale, his hands shaking slightly at his sides. The sight of him made my knees go weak, not from love, but from the crushing weight of betrayal. For a long, excruciating moment, none of us spoke. The air was heavy, suffocating. Finally, Ethan stepped forward, his voice raw. "Aubrey, please, let me explain." "Explain?" My laugh was hollow, bitter. "Explain how you signed this behind my back?" I held up the prenup like a weapon. The paper shook with the force of my anger. "I didn't want to sign it," he said quickly, desperation in his tone. "Your dad, he came to me weeks ago. He said it was standard, just a formality to protect you in case anything ever happened between us." "That's a lie," Daniel snapped. "I heard him on the phone, Ethan. This isn't about protection, it's about control." Ethan's shoulders sagged. "I know that now, but at the time, I didn't want to upset him." And his voice cracked. "He promised to fund our bakery. The dream we've been talking about since the day we met. Without his help, we couldn't afford it." My stomach churned. "So you sold him half our future? Without even telling me?" "It wasn't like that," Ethan cried. When I hesitated, he threatened me, Aubrey. He said if I didn't sign, he'd make sure my catering business went under. He has connections, permits, suppliers. He could ruin me. I stared at him, torn between fury and sorrow. "So you chose to save yourself," I said coldly. "You let him trap me? Just like he trapped my mother." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "I was trying to protect us. I thought if I just went along with it, we'd still get to build our life together." My vision blurred with hot, stinging tears. Before I could respond, a slow, deliberate clap echoed from the doorway. Richard stood there perfectly composed, his smile infuriatingly calm. "Enough lies, Ethan," he said smoothly. "Aubrey deserves to hear the truth. From me." Richard entered the room with the confidence of a king addressing his court. Even surrounded by angry faces, he exuded control. "My darling girl," he began, his tone falsely tender. "I know you're upset, but one day you'll thank me." "Thank you?" My voice was sharp, trembling. "For this? For humiliating me on my wedding day?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Humiliation is temporary. Stability lasts forever. You think you're ready to run a business, a household, a marriage without guidance? You're naive." Ethan can't provide for you alone, Ethan bristled. That's not true. Richard cut him off with a glare. You're talented, boy, but talent doesn't pay the bills. Aubrey deserves a life free from struggle, and I will ensure she has it. I was shaking, fury boiling over. This isn't about my future, Dad. This is about control. His expression darkened. You have no idea what it takes to protect someone you love. Something in his tone made the hairs on my neck stand on end. Protect or trap? I whispered. For the first time, his mask slipped. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. Your mother didn't understand either, he said quietly. She thought she could leave, take you with her. And look what happened to her. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My breath caught. You're saying... My voice cracked. What did you do to Mom? Richard didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave a small, cold smile and began walking toward the door. Outside, muffled murmurs grew louder. Guests were gathering, curious about the commotion. Panic surged through me. He wasn't just destroying my wedding, he was rewriting my entire life. I followed him into the ceremony space, my dress tangling around my legs as I stumbled forward. The room fell silent as guests turned to watch. Family, friends, business partners, everyone I'd ever loved or needed was there. Their faces filled with confusion. Richard turned to face the crowd, already composing himself like the perfect father of the bride. Not this time. I snatched the microphone meant for our vows. My hands shook, but my voice rang out clear and sharp. Before this wedding continues, I said, there's something everyone needs to hear. Gasps echoed as I held up the crumpled prenup. This is what my father forced Ethan to sign. It gives him ownership of our home, our business, our future. It wasn't about love or protection. It was about control. The room erupted into whispers. My father's investors looked horrified. My bridesmaids covered their mouths. Ethan reached for me, his eyes pleading. Aubrey? I stepped back, my heart breaking. Don't! Not now! Richard's face twisted with rage. Enough of this spectacle! He thundered. Do you think you can just walk away? Your mother tried that once, too. His next words silenced the room completely. She didn't make it very far. A collective gasp filled the air, followed by stunned, horrified silence. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then every pair of eyes turned toward me, waiting to see what I would do next. My body trembled as I stared at my father, the man I once trusted more than anyone. My voice was barely a whisper, but everyone heard it. You killed her, didn't you? The room exploded into chaos. The room exploded. Gasps turned to shouts, and shouts turned to chaos. Guests leapt to their feet, some screaming, some demanding answers. A few pulled out their phones, capturing every horrifying second on video. The pristine ceremony space, the place where I was supposed to begin a new chapter of my life, now felt like a courtroom. Ethan grabbed my hand. Aubrey, please, let me explain. No! I yanked my hand back, my voice raw. There's nothing left to explain. Behind me, Richard snarled, his composure finally unraveling. Enough of this madness. He lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage. You're ruining everything I've built. Stay back, I shouted, stumbling backward. Before Richard could reach me, Ethan stepped between us, his entire body trembling but firm. Don't you touch her, he barked, his voice shaking but strong. Richard froze, stunned by the defiance. Ethan had always been polite, submissive even, around my father. Seeing him stand tall now was shocking and strangely heartbreaking. Richard recovered quickly, sneering. You think you can protect her? You're nothing without me. I gave you everything. Her bakery, your catering business. You'd be flipping burgers if it weren't for me. Ethan's fists clenched. I don't care about any of that. You don't own me, and you sure as hell don't own her. The crowd roared. Some shouted for security. Others urged me to leave. The entire scene felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's nightmare. I looked at my father, my chest heaving, my hands shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. And then it hit me. The truth I'd been avoiding for years. All my life, I'd been trying to please him. To be the perfect daughter. To earn his approval, his love. But love wasn't control. And control wasn't love. Tears blurred my vision as I screamed, my voice breaking but powerful. I am not my mother, and you do not own me. The entire room went silent for a single electric heartbeat. Richard flinched as if I'd struck him. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, he looked small, defeated. The room seemed frozen in time. Dozens of eyes stared at me. My friends, my family, Ethan's family. Richard's powerful associates, but all I could see was Ethan. His face was pale, his hair damp with sweat. He looked like a man drowning, desperate for air. "Aubrey," he whispered, stepping closer. His voice cracked. "Please, don't leave me like this. Don't let him win." My throat tightened. I wanted to go to him. God, I wanted to rewind everything, to before the lies, before the prenup, before my father had sunk his claws into every corner of our lives. But the image of that document, the one Ethan had signed in secret, flashed in my mind. A deal made behind my back. It wasn't just paper. It was betrayal. I took a step back, shaking my head slowly. "You had every chance to tell me the truth," I said, my voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You looked me in the eyes while we planned our future, our life, and you let me believe it was ours alone." Ethan's breath caught. His hands reached for mine, then dropped helplessly to his sides. "I was scared," he admitted, his words tumbling out like confessions in a church. "I didn't know how to fight him. He controls everything, Aubrey. The business loans, the venue, even the suppliers for our bakery. If I went against him, I thought we'd lose it all." Tears stung my eyes. "That wasn't your choice to make," I said, my voice breaking. "You don't get to decide what lies I can live with." Richard scoffed behind me, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Oh, for God's sake. He signed it because he's smart. Because he knows you'd ruin yourself without me." I spun on him, my rage boiling over. "No, Dad, he signed it because you scared him. Just like you scared everyone your whole life," the crowd murmured, a ripple of shock passing through them. Turning back to Ethan, I felt my heart split in two. I loved him. That part hadn't changed. But love wasn't enough to erase the cracks forming between us. "I need to know," I said softly, my voice barely audible over the gasps and whispers. "When you proposed to me, was it because you loved me? Or because my father told you it was time?" Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. His silence was answer enough. The air went out of the room. A hollow ache spread through my chest, but beneath it was a strange clarity, like seeing the horizon after a storm. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I turned toward the guests. "This wedding is over." A collective gasp erupted. Cameras flashed. The officiant's mouth dropped open. My bridesmaids cried quietly, holding on to each other. "I deserve a marriage built on love," I said, forcing strength into my voice. "Not lies, not manipulation, and not fear." Richard lunged forward furious. "You ungrateful little—" "Stop!" I yelled, silencing him. Then, with my chin held high, I spoke the words that would define the rest of my life. "There will be no wedding today." The words seemed to echo in every corner of the hall. Even the air felt still, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Ethan staggered back a step, tears pooling in his eyes. "Aubrey?" he whispered, devastated. I wanted to run to him. Instead, I stayed rooted to the ground, my back straight and my hands clenched. "I love you," I said, my voice cracking. "But love built on lies will always collapse. I won't start my life that way." The moment the words left my mouth, the chaos resumed. Louder, harsher, irreversible. Richard's investors erupted like a volcano. "This is unacceptable," one bellowed. "You've been lying to us, Richard," another shouted. "Do you realize what this does to our partnerships?" Some were already storming toward the exit, phones to their ears as they barked orders at their assistants. Others glared at Richard with open disgust, as though just being near him was contamination. "No, wait," Richard shouted, trying to salvage what he could. "You don't understand. This is just a misunderstanding." But no one listened. One man turned at the door and delivered the final blow. "We're done with you, Richard. Your empire ends today." Richard stumbled back, visibly shaken. For the first time in my life, he didn't look powerful or intimidating. He looked old, defeated, and I felt nothing. The crowd thinned until only a handful of people remained. My bridesmaids, a few stunned relatives, and Ethan, standing like a broken statue near the altar. I approached him slowly, my shoes clicking on the marble floor. He looked up, eyes rimmed red. "Please," he whispered. "Don't let this be the end." I swallowed hard. My love for him hadn't vanished. But trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. "I need time," I said gently, though my voice wavered. "Time to heal, time to think, time to figure out who I am without my father breathing down my neck." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring. His hand shook as he held it between us. "This was supposed to be forever," he said, his voice raw. I wanted to give you the world." "You did give me something," I replied softly. "But what I need right now is freedom." His lip trembled as he nodded slowly. Then, without another word, he placed the ring back in its velvet box and set it gently on a nearby table. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't look back. He just walked to the door and slipped out silently, the heavy door closing with a sound that echoed like the end of a chapter. When he was gone, I let out a sob I didn't know I'd been holding. Later, when the hall was empty and quiet, I wandered outside alone. The evening air was cool, a soft breeze carrying the scent of roses and champagne. The courtyard was bathed in the golden glow of sunset, the very colors I'd chosen for the wedding, colors that now felt like a cruel joke. In my hands, I held the prenup. It was wrinkled and smudged from being passed around, but the signature at the bottom was still bold and sharp. Richard's name, Ethan's name, proof of every chain my father had wrapped around me. I stared at it for a long time, my emotions swirling. Anger, sadness, relief. This paper had been meant to trap me. Instead, it would become my declaration of freedom. I walked to the stone fountain in the center of the courtyard. The water was calm, reflecting the fading light like liquid gold. Slowly, deliberately, I tore the prenup into strips. Each rip was a release. Each fragment was a piece of my old life, falling away. As the last piece dangled from my fingers, I whispered, "You don't control me anymore, Dad." Then I let it fall. The scraps hit the water and floated for a moment before sinking, dissolving into nothing. I stood there breathing deeply, feeling the weight of years lift from my shoulders. My father didn't walk me down the aisle that day, I murmured to myself. He walked me into a trap. I turned away from the fountain, the setting sun warming my face, and took my first step toward a future I would build on my own. But I walked myself out, I said, a small determined smile tugging at my lips. Free. And for the first time, I truly believed it. Have you ever had to choose yourself over someone you loved, even when it broke your heart? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories of strength, survival, and starting over.